Operation Bodenplatte, the largest force of German fighters to ever take to the air. The Luftwaffe High Command throws the dice for the last time. It was a cloudless sky, light winds from the southwest, and a temperature of about -5°C. The 65 aircraft had already been pushed to their takeoff positions by ground crews. The two Ju-88 Pathfinders took off. At 1600 on 31 December, 20 190D9s of I Gruppe JG-54 flew into Fürstenau on assignment to JG-26. The JG-54 pilots included Peter Crump and Hans Prager, both formerly of JG-26. Oberst Priller and his wingman took off. To save time, the aircraft took off straight down the field, as well as along both diagonals. Next came Major Boris. He was followed by 12 aircraft of the 3rd Staffel, 12 of the 2nd, 10 of the 1st, and 10 from the 4th. 17 JG-54 aircraft brought up the rear. All but the last few aircraft formed up over Fürstenau, then dived for the ground, heading for the Zuider Zee at an altitude of only about 30 meters. Many of the UMO engines would not start in the cold. Lieutenant T.O. Neibel, leading the 2nd Schwarm, had trouble starting his engine and was the last to take off. Operation Bodenplatte. The targets were 16 tactical airfields in the Netherlands, Belgium, and eastern France. 33 fighter Gruppen and 1 ground attack Gruppe flew the mission. Operation Bodenplatte had been planned at General-Lieutenant Peltz's 14 December conference. Priller, the Commodore of JG-26, had not known of the Army's planned Ardennes attack at the time, but it was now obvious that the air and ground attacks had been planned to coincide. However, the weather had been unsuitable for air operations. By New Year's Eve, it was obvious that the ground offensive had stalled, but the air operation nevertheless proceeded. It was hoped that attacking on the morning after New Year's Eve, the enemy would be indisposed from heavy drinking. All of the airfields were to be hit simultaneously at 09:20. A dawn attack was not possible due to the limited proficiency of the average German pilot, but a dawn takeoff was feasible. 1 Gruppe leader Boris briefed the pilots of 1 Gruppe JG-26 and 3 Gruppe JG-54 that their targets were aircraft on the field at Grimbergen, and they were to be destroyed in 3 or 4 waves. JG-26 2 and 3 Gruppe would be attacking the same target, Yver Airfield near Brussels, but the Gruppenkommandure, Tony Haeckel and Walter Koprinski, flew missions entirely independent of each other. Targets were the familiar Brussels airfields the Geschwader Gruppen had occupied briefly just 4 months before. The length of the mission called for 300-liter auxiliary fuel tanks, so no bombs would be carried, and a large proportion of incendiary shells were carried. IFF sets were removed from all aircraft. The missions would be flown by independent Gruppen in close formation at low altitude. Each Gruppe would be led across the battle lines by Pathfinder aircraft, Ju-88 night fighters, which had been standing by at the 3 airfields of JG-26. The Gruppen were to fly to the target along the route shown and return the same way, but could fly a more direct route returning in case of emergency. 0842, the Zuider Zee was reached. Unteroffizier Heinz Bodarsik was a member of the 4th Staffel, but flew as Priller's wingman, and had been doing that for a long time. Radio silence was mandatory, and close formation flying was stressed. It was impossible to keep to the planned formation of 3 shallow V's, so the formation resolved itself into a long strung-out line of shawarma. The formation turned southwest towards Rotterdam. The formation was fired on by German flak. The fighters were flying over one of the most heavily defended areas on the continent, the V-2 launching sites around The Hague. The Luftwaffe planners had made a serious error. Unteroffizier Gerhard Kroll, who was flying an airplane borrowed from the Vorstaffel, was hit near Rotterdam and made an immediate belly landing. The aircraft burst into flames on impact, and Kroll leapt from the sliding aircraft with his flying suit on fire. He jumped into a ditch but couldn't break through the ice and had to roll to put out the flames. He went to a hospital for 2 weeks with facial burns. The Kapitän of the 2nd Staffel, Oblt Franz Kunz, was hit. He turned back and was forced to bail out with severe injuries. The formation had been reduced to 47 aircraft. 14 had returned to Fürstenau with equipment failure or flak damage. The rest turned south. And were fired upon again by Allied ships in the Genlt. Feldwebel Paul Steinkamp of 12 JG-54 took a shell and pulled up to 200 meters to attempt to regain the German lines. But had to bail out and was taken prisoner. Oberfeldwebel Walter Eckert of 11 JG-54 was shot down and killed. 09:15, just past the Genlt estuary, Major Boris sighted a formation of a dozen Spitfires. He later reported that they turned away without attacking, but the Spitfires brought down 3 to 5 of the 190s at the rear of the formation. Obergefreiter Dieter Kragelow joined the formation later because his engine was slow to start. He was struck from the rear by a Spitfire. His wooden propeller splintered, and he had to kill the engine before it shook the fuselage apart. Too low to bail out, Kragelow plowed into a clearing in an orchard. And became a POW. Feldwebel Paul Druschmann of 9 JG-54 was also hit by the Polish Spitfires. The startled pilot turned his head and saw a Spitfire aiming directly at him. The German pilot zoomed up to 200 meters and bailed out. He landed in an icy river and was taken prisoner. T.O. Nibel, who was the last to take off, took a long time to catch the formation, but trailed it without difficulty. At 09:20, only 2 minutes behind schedule, the remaining Focke-Wulfs climbed to 200 to 300 meters on their approach to Grimbergen. They had drifted west of the field, putting it into the glare of the rising sun. Lieutenant Crump's 10 JG-54 was assigned to flak suppression, and its 8 aircraft were positioned last in the formation. According to Peter Crump, the reason the formation originally overflew the target was that Priller's disappearance, quote, had led to a certain confusion at the head of the formation, unquote. Lieutenant Peter Crump saw that they were about to miss the field entirely and took the initiative by diving to attack, followed by the 2 flights of his Staffel. Highly visible at the takeoff point on the field was a diagonal white cross, the international symbol for a non-operational airfield. The Thunderbolt unit that the pilots had been briefed to expect was nowhere to be seen. Crump made his first pass. He strafed a 4-engine bomber on the south end of the field and set it on fire. Then, seeing no sign of any flak that needed suppressing, led his flight to shoot up everything they saw standing around, including trucks, construction equipment, sheds, and barracks. RAF defenders on the field had no armament heavier than Bren guns. The gunners had ample time to study the pilots' flight patterns and corrected their aim accordingly, beginning to hit their targets. FHR Hans Joachim Werner of the 3rd Staffel was making his second pass when his aircraft caught fire, presumably a result of gunfire. He bailed out without injury. At 09:30, Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Ausenkopf of the 2nd Staffel was firing blindly into the smoke on his second pass when his aircraft was hit at an altitude of 60 meters. It shuddered and dropped to the right. The airplane was nose-heavy, but kept flying well, except for the pull to the right. He throttled back and headed east with no rudder control. Also at 09:30, Feldwebel Karl Hartmann of the 4th Staffel, a rookie on his first combat mission, was flying as Ausenkopf's wingman. His aircraft was also hit on its second pass, while in thick smoke. He pulled up and bailed out over the field. Lieutenant Theo Neibel had eventually caught up to his swarm and led it across the field on its assigned task of flak suppression. When Neibel pulled up after his third attack, his engine quit. He had only reached an altitude of 100 meters, too low to bail out, so he decided to belly land his airplane in a freshly turned field. The landing was perfect, giving the Allies their first example of a near-whole FW-190D9. British examiners concluded that the aircraft had been brought down by a partridge strike in the radiator. As a result, in the POW camp, Neibel was nicknamed the Partridge Hunter. The 10 Focke-Wulfs of the 4th Staffel were apparently the last to arrive. It is not known why they had fallen behind JG-54. They arrived after the departure of the rest of the attackers. They made several quick strafing passes on the hangars and then turned for home. According to British records, after a 15-minute duration, the German machine guns finally fell silent. Major Boris's pilots, facing only Bren gunfire, claimed to have made 7 to 10 slow-firing passes. They noticed the presence of 4 4-engine bombers, 1 twin-engine bomber, and 1 Mustang. They claimed the destruction of all. destruction confirmed by British sources. In addition, 12 trucks, 2 tankers, and 2 hangars were set on fire. Several hangars were seriously damaged, and 1 AA position was silenced. 10 minutes after his aircraft was hit, Lieutenant Ausenkop approached the first airfield he saw, Twente, on the east side of the Netherlands. He made a smooth landing. He found that his rudder was gone. His right stabilizer was jammed down. A mechanic told him that he had been hit from beneath by the propeller of another fighter. His airplane was repaired that evening, and Ausenkop returned to Fürstenau on the 2nd. Once he learned that his wingman Hartmann had bailed out over Grimbergen and was a prisoner, Ausenkop reported that Hartmann had been hit by ground fire at the same time as himself, rather than reveal that Hartmann had rammed his airplane. Boris's aircraft returned to Germany on the reciprocal of their outbound course. The aircraft recognition abilities of the German anti-aircraft gunners around Rotterdam had not improved in the previous hour, and they once again put the Focke-Wulfs under fire. More German fighters fell. Obergefreiter Boda Vogel was killed on his first mission. Unteroffizier Karl Seidler of the Forststaffel was injured in a crash landing southwest of Osnabrück. Unteroffizier Rykhoff force-landed his plane at Almelo without injury. Some pilots simply disappeared, probably on this leg of the flight. The missing category included Priller's wingman, Unteroffizier Heinz Bodarsik, Hauptmann Willy Bottlander, Kapitän of 11 Staffel, Lieutenant Jürgen Ratzlaff of 12 JG-54, and Obergefreiter Karl-Heinz Braunert of the 4th Staffel. Pips Priller himself had returned early, without suffering combat damage. Priller had not flown a mission in several months, and was unaccustomed to flying the Dora 9. He may have become disoriented when he lost sight of the ground in the mist. At 11:24, the last pilot to reach Fürstenau landed. Seven 4th Staffel pilots landed at Quakenbrück on their last drops of fuel. 12 first group of pilots had failed to return from the mission. 4 would eventually turn up. 3 Gruppe JG-54 lost 12 of its 17 pilots, a 70% loss rate. 10 of the aircraft that had taken off that morning reached other German bases with flak damage. 2 Gruppe JG-26 had a more successful mission than 1 Gruppe. They caught 403 Squadron on the ground and flamed 11 Spitfires and damaged a dozen more, resulting in a black cloud of smoke that rose to 4,000 meters. Major Haeckel's report singled out Oberleutnant Hoffmann, the 8th Staffel Kapitän, for his combat leadership, and Lieutenant Adi Glunz for the destruction he had wrought in his 9 low-altitude attacks, which included the destruction of 5 aircraft, damage to 2 more, the destruction of a truck, and more. This had been Glunz's 238th and last combat sortie. In March, he left the Geschwader to train on the Me-262. 150 aircraft under command of JG-26 took off. 32 pilots were killed or taken prisoner. Of the 900 fighters that took off that day, 300 failed to return to their bases, with 214 pilots killed, missing, or taken prisoner. Counted among the missing were 19 irreplaceable formation leaders, 3 Kommandoren, 6 Gruppenkommandore, and 10 Staffelkapitän. Only 1/3 of the German force made their attacks entirely according to plan. Few Allied pilots were lost. All Allied units were back up to strength in aircraft in only a week. When Generalleutnant Peltz was asked after the war why, after the Ardennes ground offensive failed, wasn't the air offensive canceled, he replied, quote, "It never entered our heads," unquote, and war is an exercise in illogic. Bodenplatte had weakened the German fighter force past any hope of rebuilding. It had sacrificed itself in a single grand and futile gesture. Thanks for watching.